Hello friends and welcome back. This is Books of the Book. My name is David Rodriguez and we are so glad that you can take this time and join us as you open your Bibles with us. We are studying the Gospel of John and you're welcome to pick up with us. We are in chapter 12 and it has been an amazing experience with this Bible study. We're studying with Dr. John Pauline. He is currently the Dean of Religion at Loma Linda University and he comes all the way from Loma Linda, California. And I keep telling him I've been blessed. I have seen so many spiritual applications from this book. And as he says, this is a spiritual gospel. And Dr. Pauline, when you say this is a spiritual gospel, because you said it before, but tell us briefly, what do you mean when the Gospel of John is spiritual? Aren't all the Gospels spiritual?
It depends, I guess, on how you come at it, but I think the primary motive of Matthew, Mark, and Luke is to get the story down. This is what Jesus did. This is what Jesus said. The simple telling of the story is enough. But in John, the story is only the beginning. Mm-hmm. Each of the stories functions like a parable with all kinds of spiritual meanings. And so John, I guess, is content that the story has been told, and now he's going to take aspects of the story, especially ones that only he seems to know about or only he emphasizes, and use that story to go deeper. And the reason for this is that as the apostles went out, they would tell the story of Jesus, but then they would interpret it. But once the apostles are dead, mm-hmm. the interpretation has to come out of the story. So John felt that the three Gospels that were there before, by themselves, were not everything that the second generation needed. The second generation needed the interpretation, needed the deeper spiritual meaning be brought to them so that they could function without the living apostles.
And when you say the second generation, again, it's that a group or that generation who never got to see physically Jesus or his miracles being performed.
Or his disciples.
So we happen to be that generation.
Mm-hmm. You see, as long as the disciples are alive, remembering everything Jesus did, they can interpret it all. But once the apostles are dead, the words on the page have to do the job. Mm-hmm. And so John, I think, is seeing that the three other Gospels are very, very good, very, very important, very useful. But they're not fully going to do the task by themselves of reaching a generation that doesn't have that living voice, that only has the words on the page. So John puts words on a page that will elaborate these things.
And I like what you said also, that the first generation who were present in the life of Jesus don't have an advantage over our faith, you know.
Right.
So in fact, you even said that it could be to our advantage that we didn't see Jesus physically.
Time and again in the Gospel of John, the people who are standing there with Jesus have doubts, they don't get it, they reject him. Physical presence of Jesus is no guarantee of anything. But if our hearts are open to the Holy Spirit and to the words of the Gospels, we can have everything they could have had and more.
So today now we are talking about, we're at chapter 12. Mm-hmm. Tell us, what are we studying today in this chapter?
Well, chapter 12 is kind of a transition in the gospel. We've been working through some 3 years of Jesus' ministry. John touches base on a story here, a saying there, another story. Jesus' public ministry. And with chapter 12, we're coming to the close of the public ministry of Jesus. This is the last part of his public ministry. And with chapter 13, he's going to go into the closet, so to speak, with his disciples. And what goes on there is not for the wider world, but he's going to deal directly with them. And he becomes much more of a teacher in chapters 13 through 17. In his public work, it's been more about what he does and the miracles and one-on-one encounters with various people who have not been believers before. Very public. But now we're at the point where we're going to start transitioning to a more personal, private kind of ministry.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and where shall we begin?
Well, chapter 12 has a series of short vignettes, kind of like stories, but they're just little pieces of the last few days of Jesus' ministry. It starts like a week before his crucifixion, and we'll see several little stories here. The first one is the climax of the Mary story, I think, and that's in chapter 12, 1-8. So why don't we start there?
Then 6 days before the Passover, Jesus came to Bethany, where Lazarus was who had been dead, whom he had raised from the dead. There they made him a supper, and Martha served, but Lazarus was one of those who sat at the table with him. Then Mary took a pound of very costly oil of spikenard, anointed the feet of Jesus, and wiped his feet with her hair. And the house was filled with the fragrance of the oil. But one of the disciples, Judas Iscariot, Simon's son, who would betray him, said, "Why was this fragrant oil not sold for 300 denarii and given to the poor?" This he said, not that he cared for the poor, but because he was a thief and had the money box, and he used to take what was put in it. But Jesus said, "Let her alone. She has kept this for the day of my burial. For the poor you have with you always, but me you do not have always."
Part of the concept of a spiritual gospel is that various characters in the story play bigger roles. They're almost like actors in a drama. And here you have three characters in the story. You have Mary, Martha, and Lazarus. They happen to be brothers and sisters, one single family. But each of them relates to Jesus a little bit differently. And in Mary, we see the kind of person who's up and down. Sometimes she's really locked into the spiritual things. Sometimes she gets caught in some unfortunate situations. But here she represents absolute sold out love and devotion to Jesus. She is going to give the equivalent of a year's wages and just sort of waste it on a moment. Martha wouldn't have done that. She would have calculated, this is really costly. Couldn't we just dip our finger in and smell up the room and that would be enough? I mean, she pours enough perfume out there to smell up the whole neighborhood. Maybe Jerusalem is even catching it 2 miles away, you see. It's an absolutely wasteful. I mean, Judas is right in the sense, it's a waste. But she feels nothing is a waste if it expresses her absolute devotion to Jesus. So she represents all those believers who, while they may not be the most stable people on earth, they love Jesus with all their hearts, and they're willing to do even wasteful, silly things in the eyes of other people in order to express their devotion to Jesus. Martha, on the other hand, she reflects faith, service, steadiness, you see. And she represents those believers that Jesus can count on, so to speak. She'll be there even when all else fails. She'll be cooking and cleaning when nobody else feels like doing it. She's steady, she's solid. Lazarus, he represents the resurrection hope that all of us have. He already tasted what we will all one day experience in Jesus Christ. So the characters here, John is not just telling the story, but he's unpacking it in ways that we can pick a character that we relate to and really bring it home.
Now, there is another character in here that I don't think we leave out, and John certainly didn't leave out, and I just hope that we don't choose this character, but that is Judas. And apparently he, it seems that he cares for the poor. And his following statement was, why was this fragrant oil not sold for 300 denarii and given to the poor? So it almost seems like we could have used this and multiplied the blessing to many others.
Yeah, done a lot of good with it.
Right, and
this is a waste.
Right, and the next verse, the narrator kind of he says the following, he said this not because he cared for the poor, but because he was a thief. So speaking of characters, who does this character represent?
Well, one thing that scholars have noticed in the Gospel of John is a strong dose of irony. Irony is a literary concept where what's there on the surface is the opposite of reality. You know, it's kind of like somebody has a baby and he gives a cigar, and the person lights up the cigar and it blows up in his face. It's a practical joke. You see, the idea was that this was a pleasant gift in honor of something, and then it kind of blows up in the face and everybody laughs at the victim, you see, kind of a thing. So irony is kind of in that regard. And Judas is playing the idiot here in a real sense, because he's so serious. You know, this is a waste, and this money should have been given to the poor. Well, the reality is he's the one in charge of giving money to the poor, and he's stealing from the bag. So the irony is, the surface, he says, this money should be given to the poor. The reality is, he's the poor. He's the one that is lifting from the bag.
It's almost like saying, why didn't I get a piece of that?
Yeah.
You know, it has to go through me.
Yeah.
And
he's upset. You know, there's a little bit more that he can pull out of. But you know, there's a deeper irony here. And John always goes a little bit deeper. The amazing thing is this. In reality, no one in the history of the world has ever given more to the poor than Jesus did. I mean, than Judas did when he betrayed Jesus. Because in giving Jesus up to the cross, that was a gift that did more for the poor than anything else anyone has ever done. So Judas, of course, didn't intend that. But in betraying Jesus, in a sense, he gave the world a huge gift at his own loss.
I never really saw that that spiritual application, that he didn't. It wasn't obviously no monetary value or anything, but it was the greatest gift to humanity. He gave Jesus.
And that's how God works. God takes actions of ours. Sometimes our actions are well-intentioned. Sometimes they're ill-intentioned. In this case, it was ill-intentioned. And yet God can use the nasty things people do, the anger, the hatred, evil deeds, and God can take those and bring something good out of it. And that brings a little bit of hope to people who have been robbed, people who have been abused, people who have suffered at the hands of angry people, to realize if God could take Judas's miserable act and bring the greatest thing that has ever happened on this earth out of it, salvation for all who will receive it, then the things that have happened to me and my suffering, God can use that to bring something beautiful out of it. And so there's a sideline to all this story. Another side of this is that often our greatest strength is our greatest weakness. Judas's strength was handling money. And in that strength, the disciples trusted him. They never asked, you know, what the bottom line was. Judas can take care of it. He's good at that. We'll let him handle it. But his greatest strength became his greatest temptation. You see, like a pharmacist. A pharmacist's great strength is being able to give people exactly what they need. But that strength is also weakness, because pharmacists have the ability to become drug abusers themselves, and nobody can check them. They're the ones in charge of it, see? So the temptation is there. And at our School of Pharmacy, we train pharmacists in the importance of ethics, that they, above all people, have to be true to themselves when no one else is looking. Because nobody can monitor what the pharmacist does with the drugs, because the pharmacist is the monitor, you see? So your greatest strength and your greatest weakness, I'm not ragging on pharmacists, please. I'm just using it as an illustration that the area in which we're most talented and strong can sometimes be the place where we fall. And we have to be aware of that.
Right, and as Paul says, he who thinks he stands, let him take heed lest he fall. And it was Peter also in his self-sufficiency. He believed, he trusted in himself, and yet that's when he denied the Lord. We do know the tragic story of Judas, unfortunately, but that is quite sad. You know, and we were talking about in earlier programs how Jesus said that that there are also wolves. You know, Jesus said he's the good shepherd, and then there are wolves in sheep's clothing. And referring to the Pharisees, who the Pharisees had casted out the blind man from the synagogue, and Jesus took him. But as we see here, it seems that even within his disciples there was a wolf. Is that applicable? Would that be fair to say?
if we allow Satan to get into our lives, he can turn even our well-intentioned efforts into great destruction. I think Judas actually had some good intentions. He was trying to provoke Jesus to get out there and do what he was supposed to do, become king.
What was in Judas's heart that led him to eventually betray Jesus or turn him to the religious leaders today?
Let's get into that in a moment, but I think right now we need to go to a break.